let's start off talking about the compositional process with such a huge work as your self-titled double record, or as those two records that you are putting out. Where do you start as a composer?
I start with a core idea of what kind of emotional impact I want an album to have. That does always start. And then I have a sketchbook where I put in all kinds of ideas and limit, it needs to point in the same direction. And when you work in a studio environment with today's technology, there's really no limit to what you can do. So I think it's even more important to kind of sketch out. So to cut it short, like on the musical side, I thought, okay, I wanted to go back to the core elements that I've been working on since the very beginning of since the first Emperor record, this attempt to blend extreme black metal, extreme metal with orchestral elements, from soundtracks, predominantly trying to blend those two. So okay, I decided I'll have the traditional metal lineup and also just a full symphony orchestra. No synthesizers, no hybrid, anything, just those two. And I decided to, instead of trying to just add orchestral elements to the metal version, before I started writing anything, I said I'll try to orchestrate and arrange things so that they work together and independently. With this idea of maybe exploring different dynamic and emotional ranges of, in principle, the same music. So like the first singles, Pilgrimage, it's a very hard metal song, but when you listen to the equivalent in the orchestral, it starts off like with almost whispery, quiet cellos. It's the same music, but two different impacts. And technically, since it was, in principle, a rather simple approach, just write all the music as a piano short score, and then just distribute. I arranged it for the metal ensemble, if you will, and then arrange the same music for the orchestral parts. And then, of course, fine tune, with the arrangement to make everything fit. But it's, in principle, the doing it is the idea is very simple, and then the programming and everything that goes into it is really just a lot of work.
Where do you start? Do you sit down on or what's your setup like when you start working on such a project?
Thank you. Now, I have my studio, and so sometimes I'll just start with guitar riffs, but oftentimes I'll just hum things out, or just dabble with my keyboard and put it all together. So it's but are you talking about technically how my setup?
You said you do it in the studio, so you're sitting with software synths or with hardware synths also, or how do you start composing those things?
Oh no, just software synth with some kind of piano sound.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a gear nerd, so I have some hardware synths and everything. But since this was going to be purely orchestral, I didn't go that way, because it's when you work with synthesizers, the sound design is such a big part of composition. I wanted this to be just very pure. Like if it works with a piano sound, it will probably work when you flesh it out. So I'm a Cubase user since the early 90s, and for the orchestral parts, I've too many Spitfire audio libraries, and for this purpose, since it wasn't going to be any ensemble patches, but like very individual parts for all violin ones, violins twos. I used predominantly the BBC Symphony Orchestra, which I thought sounds great, and it also have all the individual articulations to go really detailed. And did a full mock-up like that, and there's then added some live percussion, and also Chris Baum, who did kind of redid playing on top, several layers of all violin ones and violin two parts. So all through the orchestral part, even though it's predominantly samples, it's always organic elements playing along.
Your symphonic or your compositional or your symphonic side with you have or let me rephrase that. You were a pioneer in metal music with that symphonic side of music, with that compositional side, with the early Emperor records, with your keyboard work. What were your influences like regarding of composers and also film composers in particular?
No, I mean, well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I mean, I for the record, I have no, musical, even no formal education or anything. It's all DIY and self-taught. And even back in Emperor, and the reason I wanted to, add that element to the music, it was I've always felt that metal was very kind of one-dimensionally just hard, But then we listened to a lot of soundtracks, Jerry Goldsmith, The Omen, is probably still my favorite soundtrack, but also for Alien, but also, all the John Williams scores and the Bernard Herrmann, and also with analog synthesizers and stuff like John Carpenter, for the Halloween movies, and which has also kind of been coming back. If you listen to like the Stranger Things soundtrack, there's so many influences, but basically they were so emotionally charged, with the dynamic build and everything. So that was the influence to try to, even though the sonics were very static with all the blast beats and heavy guitars and everything, at least with adding these orchestral elements, you could at least simulate some kind of ebb and flow, if you will. So that was but it was in the beginning, of course, it was like just super simple. Using my Roland JV 1080 with an orchestral card, doing ensemble patches, playing chords, and some melodies on top. So it was nothing fancy, but with a lot of ambition.
So you'd say the idea back then was the same.
I did very same.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the stuff that sticks with you. I mean, I know for me, I think the most influential record on me ever was Iron Maiden's Seventh Son of Seventh Son, and I know from a lot of Iron Maiden fans, Seventh Son, like, oh, they're starting using keyboards. This is not Iron Maiden. For me, it was the opposite. It's like this is metal, and it's even more. The keyboards, that epic part that made it even more epic. That was kind of why I got into it. So it's always been a fascination of mine to, experiment with the different layers, I guess.
And it kind of elevated black metal or metal in general to a whole new level of depth, like compositional wise, but also it gave it that cinematic quality.
Yeah, and that was the whole idea. If you see the lyrics and everything, and even the whole aesthetics of early black metal, if or you could say it almost took two directions. It took this direction that we took, with the more epic, cinematic style, and then you had Darkthrone going the other way, like going back to the very core kind of primitive, Hellhammer early Bathory side. So I guess if you take it from Bathory, the early Bathory was really in your face, primitive, and then evolved into, Bloodfire Death, which is for me my favorite Bathory album, which also has this huge epic element. And so I guess so some of the early Norwegian bands, went backwards to the early Bathory stuff, and some of us went further with the more evolved battery stuff.
And also in terms of sounds, the scope of the sound and the sound quality, probably there was also a bit of difference. I remember like Burzum recording with one mic, and everything as terrible as possible, or as like as sharp as possible.
He would initially have use a plastic bucket as one of his toms. Toms, you know.
You used that, or he used it?
No, Burzum.
Burzum used, yeah. Used That's funny. So other than that, when you compare your approach to the whole composing back in those days to now, what would you say? How would you describe your journey as a composer like?
It's just adding new experience and some more tools with every recording. You know, I always try to, what can I say, put a sort of educational element or challenge to every new record, because you know I love that part of it as well. I just want to have as many tools as possible, you know, and coming, you know, from that background, just I started very early on to write my own songs. I think I was 11 when I had my first 4-track recorder, you know, putting together the musical puzzle, which is, I guess, being the core ambition for me and joy. And every time I you know, started a new album, I wanted to add, you know, some new experience for myself to build on. And yeah, so it's, what can I say? The motivation and kind of source for why I do this has been a constant throughout my career. So it's just that with experience, I've been able to go more in depth, you know, in a sense of what I do, and explore some new territories, but still maintaining, I guess, some constants. It's, you know, this just harsh vocals and distorted guitars. Yeah, it's probably my most fluent form of expression, if you will. It comes very natural for me, and everything else. So those are kind of constant, and then I try to change up everything around it in a way.
I mean, that exploration of new territories that you just mentioned, it probably also requires a lot of laboratory work in the studio, so to say, explorations of new means, apart from the compositional process itself. How would you say that's weighted? How much of your work in the studio is laboratory work and exploration of possibilities and new pathways?
Very much so, and especially in you know, in between albums, you know, when you get started on the project, it's very focused. You know, since I do mostly everything myself, I just put on different hats. So, okay, I have to record all the guitars, then I have to do. So it's very, very systematic. But in between that, I oftentimes blend, you know, creative work with more, as I say, laboratory work. And I've also done stuff like, you know, creating programming expression maps for all my libraries, which is super tedious, and then ended up using individual tracks instead. Just like a recent addition, I think programming string parts, you know, with modulation and expression with controllers is something that I got used to, but I never felt that I got. You know, woodwinds and brass is harder because it has a different attack and ebb and flow with the breathing and everything. So for this record, I bought myself one of these breath controllers, you know, so that I could, and it was easier for me to program the dynamics of woodwind and brass parts using this, you know, where you get the breath more authentic. You know, it sounded more real. Small stuff like that. And also, the way of combining libraries and putting it all together, but also a lot of studies of orchestral texture, balancing foreground stuff and background stuff, and yeah, a lot of learning, small studying, and it's so much easier to do now with the internet and YouTube. And back in the day, it's really hard to read Korsakov, wasn't it? Principles of orchestration, when you have no, formal background.
What would you say is the trickiest part about orchestration, and not necessarily from a composer's point of view, but also from a technical point of view, to make it sound as you have it in your head?
Yeah, it's the timing wise, because obviously the attack of notes. So this whole thing working with negative delay, so that everything lines up and the transients hit in the right places. But obviously there are differences between different instruments in when the peak transient hits in, and just to make it work. But I think in the beginning, when you're researching libraries and everything, it's easy to be kind of obsessed with the recording, and then later to realize that probably the most important part of making it sound real is just to do all the individual orchestration properly, and study some old scores of people who actually know how to do this, and be very conscious about voicing, voice leading, and dynamics. As I said, you think foreground, background, texture, melody, harmony, counterpoint, that you really give everything its own place, that you don't mash up the harmonic range of the melody with chordal structures. And so it's the old school stuff of arranging that is probably more important to the end result, rather than having the most expensive library. And I found out after buying all the expensive libraries. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's it. And regarding guitars, I mean, I know that you're using digital stuff like Neural DSP, like the plugins, from what I've understood, and also like the Quad Cortex. How do you approach recording guitars?
For many years now, I always find a way to record DI, and that's because I found it. I have to put on different hats. So when I'm recording guitar, I have to be the guitar player. I can't be the guitar player and the engineer and the assistant. So recording DIs, with just some very basic patches, whether that's from a Kemper or a Quad Cortex, or just DI with Neural or Bogren Digital. And then I have the DIs, and then I can put on my engineering hat, and then reamp and do that part. So for this album, I actually brought out. I still do use a lot of the Neural stuff, especially for leads and everything, because it's very easy and very creative and hands-on. But for rhythm guitars and more chord tones, I brought out all my old amp heads and everything, and reamped through with pedals and all that. But I was using the two notes. What's it called? Something X. We just where you can get, and then you use IRs. I use the GGD. Get good. What you call classic stacks, or they have some amazing IR modules where you can blend different cabinets and mics and everything. It sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, I think also Jens Bogren, who mixed the album, he also reamped some of the rhythm guitars with his setup to blend it into the mix. So it's all very, very open-ended and fluid. But I found it. I kind of these days digital is so good that in the end it's who would notice. But just for the tactile experience, to bring out all my pedals from my drawer, and just spontaneously say, like, okay, I'll do a phaser for this lead, and have a phaser pedal, and just dial in the sound and capture that one sound for that small part. It's a very more tactile, creative process. It's like with analog synthesizers, in a dense mix, whether it's some kind of moldy software or the real thing, it doesn't really matter. But it's when you turn filters on real instruments, it just you make other creative decisions, I think.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned Jens Bogren, who obviously has also a lot of very great IRs and a lot of great stuff one can use. What's the collaboration with him like?
I mean, I've been working with Jens since 2009, 2010, and his team, Fascination Street, the studio there. Amazing team so he's been mixing most of my records, but I've also been working with Linus and some of the other guys there for things, and so far, as as a self-recording artist, it's he's always managed, him and his team has always managed to bring back my recordings in a mix that really accelerated them, so how I do things and how he transforms it is a really good match, and he's of course brilliant at what he does, and his attention to detail and balance and everything is just amazing. And now with Bogren Digital, the new software company with the IRs and everything, but also have you tried the MLC amp, the Sub-Zero 100?
No, I have a couple of IRs of his, but I don't have any amps.
The one obviously is really easy, and I use them a lot for tracking now, because it's so easy. It's like one knob is like a great rhythm sound. But MLC amps, I have the real one myself, but also they did a collaboration with Bogren Digital, where they did a full emulation of that amp, also with pedals and everything, with also not static IRs, but they have some new technology, I think, where there's some kind of dynamic and kind of randomization process in the IRs themselves, so that you get more of a lively response from the speaker, then, because the IRs, of course, are static print. But this is more dynamic. I'm not quite sure what goes on under the hood, but it sounds pretty sick.
And regarding amps, you just said that for the rhythm parts, you reamped your actual amp heads. Which amp heads are those? What do you prefer?
I think I brought out. I have a vintage JCM 800. 100 watt from the right side of the 80s. And I have an orange Tiny Terror. I still kept my Engel Savage 120, and also the Black Star Artisan 100, which is built hand wired like an old plexi. Sounds really good. And for the majority of the rhythm parts, I did the MLC Sub-Zero 100.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but it was really a mix and match of whatever fit the part. So I was constantly rewiring and bringing in different pedals and everything. Yeah. I've been using them for years now, and for me, it's just a different league. And they've been very kind to me, and I play their 6 strings, 7 strings, 8 strings, and they also sent me a 9 string. But for this album in particular, it's think it's only one song that is an 8-string song, and then because of the nature of the record, that I wanted it to be very orchestral. I for the first time I wrote the entire thing mostly with a drop C tuning, that D standard with the drop C, because then you have the fifth. It's the two lower strings are tuned similar to the cellos, and of course with the bass with contrabasses. So I felt it was natural tuning for writing for orchestra, because then the overlap between cellos and guitar, I could play solo parts with my guitar essentially. Which really, I think, added to the sound. And I think the drop C tuning is kind of a harmonic range that I haven't really explored, because from standard 6-string, standard tuning, and to 7-string, it's two different ranges, but like this C drop C tuning is kind of in between the two, which I really like. It's so to vary things up. But I think my main guitar for this was the HO headless guitar with Lundgren pickups, and then I doubled up with they have a Tele model called the TO with an Evertune bridge and Fishman Fluence pickups, which was a really nice complement to the other guitar, so you get a bit of diversity there. And of course I mixed in lead parts with I have an 060, which is set up with the traditional more like a Strat tremolo and everything, so different lead parts, and I used my Fanfret 8-string from them for the 8-string song. So it's mixed, but the main guitar was this headless 6-string, and it's just I can't really speak highly enough of them. Amazing team, and the quality of the builds are just unsurpassable. And it's untraditional, of course. There's no wood; it's all composite, which I know a lot of people are skeptical towards. The guitar making is a very conservative business, but the way they resonate, there are no dead spots, on any of the frets, and also the translation between the different models. I don't know how they do that, but even when I got the 9-string, which is kind of overwhelming, but still it was so easy. I was right at home immediately, because it's something with the profile of the neck and everything that all the models that I have, I always try to get different models with different setups, so I have all these kind of colors to play with. But on a technical level, I'm always at home. It's always comfortable. And also the practical aspect of traveling with these guitars. I fly to Japan, take them out of the case, they're still in tune. There's no variation of humidity or anything. They're like rock solid for everything. So amazing company.
And when you travel, speaking of traveling, do you go amp-wise? Do you go digital then because of the?
Since after the pandemic, since the Quad, I pre-ordered the Quad Cortex before it was released. So I've been using that. I was live. I was on a Kemper previously, because how it is with rental amps, especially on festivals and everything. You can get the same model. They don't really sound the same, and with whatever cabinet and whatever, with flying gigs, there's so much randomness. And now that I'm in airs for many, many years, and just to have the stability of that. And in particular about when I was doing a bus tour in 2018 in Europe, and Then I was playing more club shows, where direct sound for the audience is part of the sound. Sometimes it sounds very strange when you only have live drums and everything else is digital. You get like live cymbal bleed for the front row, but all the guitars are coming out. There's nothing from stage. So even though I was playing a Kemper, I brought a couple of 2x10 combos that I would feed signals as well. So there's still amp sound coming from the stage because it needs to blend in. But for festival stages, that is predominantly what we do with my solo band and Emperor. And the audience will never hear any direct sound from the stage anyways. So I think it just makes up for a cleaner stage sound and makes life much more easy for us as performers, for our sound engineering crew and everyone. And the way, I did get all the early Line 6 pods and everything for convenience. But of course it was early stages, but these days, I think, the first preset I brought up on the Quad Cortex when I got it, was like immediate. And I love technology. The technology has allowed me to, I've had, I've lived from tape till having now a symphony orchestra at my fingertips. I love it. It's amazing.
And you don't miss the aspect of the moving air when you just play with a monitor on stage, on a festival stage, for instance?
No. Personally, I don't. It's always nice, but it's nice for yourself, But on the practical level, it's all just makes things very, very complicated for everybody else. And as long as you're in theirs, you have to play really loud to get that, and especially it's playing this style of music, it's sometimes very complicated to sing and play this stuff at the same time. So having, it's like inner mixes, you can have a nice sound that sounds like the record in a way, or you have a practical sound that makes you do your job, So when I'm performing it's not about me feeling, I'm not there to experience it myself. I'm there to have the information and tools that I can perform to the best of my ability, So it's I think I've tried everything like that, and this is definitely the most convenient and the way I can perform best.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about the beginning of your creative process and about the middle, but I'd also like to talk about the end of the creative process of an album project. Are you good at letting stuff go? Do you know when it's time to say, now it's finished? Because I think as a studio worker also, there's always the possibility to do more and to...
No, but deadlines and having other people mix it. Like when I had recording and I talked to Jens, like, how's your schedule for mixing the album? And it's like, well, I have a pocket for this period, and that's my deadline. Then I have to finish it from there, because this is this old saying that any pieces of art, they're never finished; they're just abandoned. And I think deadlines are key to getting things done.
Yeah, well then, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It was really interesting.
Thank you so much for the support. I hope you it made some sense. There's a lot of rambling from me on all things.
Fantastic! I really love the record and a big fan of your work.
Thank you.
Huge pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, it was nice. I'm a gear nerd, so it's always nice when someone asks those questions as well, where I get to talk about guitars and amps and stuff like that, or sample for that matter, because usually it's more about more traditional metal into stuff.
Yeah. Awesome.
Perfect.